I was standing in my driveway at 4:30 in the morning, watching the snow come down so thick I could barely see my neighbor's house across the street, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something told me to pick up. "This Oliver Fitzgerald?" a crisp voice asked on the other end. "Speaking," I said, pulling my coat tighter against the wind that was starting to whip the falling snow into horizontal sheets. "This is Margaret Chen from the governor's office. We have an emergency situation developing across Connecticut, and your name came up as one of the most reliable private plow contractors in the Hartford area. The state needs to clear critical routes immediately. The governor is personally authorizing emergency contracts. Are you available?" I looked at my F-350 with the 8-foot plow blade attached to the front, sitting right there in my driveway where it had been for the past 3 days as I'd prepared for this storm. The Weather Service had been calling it the blizzard of the decade, and they weren't exaggerating. We'd already gotten 14 inches overnight, and another 2 feet was expected before nightfall. "Yes, madam. I'm available and ready to go right now." "Excellent. I'm sending you a contract and route assignment via email right now. The governor's office will be paying double the standard emergency rate given the severity of conditions. You'll be clearing Route 44 between Canton and Avon, focusing on access to the hospital and emergency services. This is critical infrastructure, Mr. Fitzgerald." "Understood. I'll head out as soon as I get the paperwork. It's already in your inbox. Sign it electronically and start immediately. The state is counting on you." I hung up and practically ran inside, my boots tracking snow across the kitchen floor. My wife Sarah was already up making coffee, her face worried as she looked out the window at the apocalyptic conditions. "Who was that?" she asked. "The governor's office. They want me to clear Route 44. It's an emergency state contract." Her eyes went wide. "Oliver, that's amazing. But be careful out there." I pulled up my email on my phone and found the contract waiting. The pay rate made my jaw drop. $1,500 for the day, plus fuel reimbursement and hazard pay. I signed it with my finger on the screen and forwarded a copy to my own email for records. "I'll be careful," I promised, kissing her on the cheek. "This is the big leagues now. State contract." I grabbed my thermos, filled it with the coffee Sarah had just brewed, and headed back out into the storm. The wind was really howling now, and I had to lean into it to make it to my truck. I climbed into the cab, started the engine, and let it warm up for a minute while I programmed my route into the GPS. That's when I saw the headlights coming down the street. Not just any headlights, but the distinctive yellow flashers of a tow truck. At 4:45 in the morning. During a blizzard, the tow truck pulled up right in front of my driveway, blocking me in. I watched in disbelief as someone got out of the passenger side. The security light on my garage illuminated her face as she approached, and I felt my stomach sink. Patricia Henderson, the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I rolled down my window. "Patricia, what are you doing out here in this weather?" She was bundled up in an expensive looking-down coat. Her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun that made her already pinched face look even more severe. At 52, Patricia had dedicated the last decade of her life to making sure every single resident of our subdivision followed every single rule in the HOA handbook, no matter how ridiculous. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I'm here on official HOA business," she announced, her voice carrying that particular tone of self-righteous authority that made my teeth grind. "Your commercial vehicle is in violation of Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the Meadowbrook Estates Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. No commercial vehicles are permitted to be parked in driveways or visible from the street." I stared at her. "Patricia, Are you serious right now? It's a blizzard. I have a state contract to clear roads. I need to leave right now. The HOA does not recognize weather conditions as an exemption to our rules, Mr. Fitzgerald. This has been an ongoing issue. You've received 3 written warnings over the past month about parking your plow truck in your driveway. Since you failed to comply, the board voted last night to authorize towing. You held a board meeting during a blizzard warning. We conducted it via video conference. Very efficient. Now, I need you to move away from the vehicle so Thomas can hook it up. The tow truck driver was already getting out, looking miserable and cold. I recognized him as Thomas Burke, who ran Burke's Towing over on Maple Street. He gave me an apologetic shrug. "Thomas, you're really going to tow my truck right now?" I called out. "Sorry, Oliver. She's paying triple rate for the emergency call out. I got bills to pay too." I looked back at Patricia. "I just got hired by the governor's office." "The governor, Patricia. I have a state contract to clear emergency routes. People could die if those roads aren't cleared." "Then you should have thought about that before repeatedly violating HOA regulations," she said coldly. "The truck will be taken to Burke's impound lot. You can retrieve it once you've paid the towing fee and the HOA's fine of $500 for repeated violations." $500? Are you out of your mind? The fine structure is clearly outlined in the CCRs you agreed to when you purchased your home, Mr. Fitzgerald. Now please step aside. I couldn't believe this was happening. I pulled out my phone and called the number that had just contacted me, hoping someone at the governor's office would still be available. "Governor's Emergency Operations Center," a different voice answered. "This is Oliver Fitzgerald. I was just hired to clear Route 44. I have a problem. My HOA is trying to tow my plow truck out of my driveway right now." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, did you say your homeowners association is towing your truck during the blizzard emergency?" "Yes. Right now, they're hooking it up as we speak." "Stay on the line." I watched helplessly as Thomas attached the chains to my truck's front axle. Patricia stood there with her arms crossed, looking incredibly pleased with herself. The voice came back on the phone. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I've conferenced in the governor's legal counsel. Can you put your HOA president on the phone?" I held out my phone to Patricia. "The governor's office wants to talk to you." She looked startled but took the phone. "This is Patricia Henderson, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association." I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I watched Patricia's face go from smug to confused to pale in about 30 seconds. But the HOA rules clearly state." "Yes, I understand, but we have the legal right to enforce our covenants. A state of emergency declaration supersedes." "I don't think that's." "Yes, but..." Her voice got smaller with each interruption. "I see. Yes, I understand. No, I..." "Yes, madam." She handed my phone back to me like it was contaminated. "Mr. Fitzgerald," the voice on the phone said. "This is Jennifer Walsh, legal counsel for the governor. I've just informed Miss Henderson that the governor declared a state of emergency at midnight. Under Connecticut General Statutes, Section 28(9), all private property and vehicles can be commandeered for emergency response purposes, and any interference with emergency operations is a misdemeanor. If your truck is towed, she will be personally charged, and the HOA will be held liable for any delays in emergency services. Is the tow truck still there?" "Yes, madam." "Let me speak to the driver." I walked over to Thomas and handed him my phone. He listened for a moment, his eyes going wide, then quickly disconnected the chains from my truck. "No, madam, I'm releasing it right now." "Yes, madam. Sorry, madam." He practically threw my phone back at me and jumped into his tow truck. Patricia was standing in the snow, looking like she'd been slapped. "This isn't over, Mr. Fitzgerald. When the emergency declaration is lifted, that truck better not be in your driveway." "Miss Henderson," Jennifer Walsh's voice came through my phone, clear enough that Patricia could hear it. "I'm still on the line. Mr. Fitzgerald's vehicle is now officially designated as emergency response equipment under state authority. Any further interference will result in immediate legal action. Do I make myself clear?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She turned and stomped back to her car, a BMW SUV that probably cost more than my truck and plow combined. I watched her drive away, then put the phone back to my ear. "Thank you. Get those roads cleared, Mr. Fitzgerald. Lives depend on it. And document everything with your HOA." Something tells me this isn't over. She was right about that. I finally got on the road at 5:15, 45 minutes behind schedule. The snow was coming down so hard my wipers could barely keep up even on full speed. The streets of our subdivision were completely buried, and I had to plow my way out just to reach the main road. Route 44 was a disaster. Cars were abandoned on the shoulder, buried under snow drifts. The highway department's trucks had made one pass earlier, but that had been hours ago, and the snow had already covered their work. I dropped my plow and started the slow, methodical process of clearing the eastbound lanes. The work was exhausting and required total concentration. Every few minutes I had to adjust for wind gusts that threatened to push me off the road. The visibility was maybe 20 feet on a good moment, sometimes dropping to almost nothing when the wind really picked up. But I kept at it, pushing wall after wall of snow off to the shoulder, clearing a path wide enough for emergency vehicles. Around 8 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Oliver, you need to see this. Patricia is posting about you on the neighborhood Facebook group." "What's she saying?" "She's claiming you threatened her, and that you're using your state contract to avoid HOA responsibilities. She's calling for an emergency meeting to discuss removing the Fitzgerald property from the association." "She can't do that. We own our house." "I know, but she's got people worked up." Deborah Whitmore and Susan Chen are backing her up in the comments, but there are also people defending you. Mike Rodriguez just posted that you're out doing essential work and Patricia should be ashamed of herself. "I don't have time for HOA drama right now, Sarah. I've got another 6 miles to clear before I can even take a break." "I know. Just be aware. And be careful out there." I kept plowing. By noon, I'd cleared the entire eastbound section of my route and started on the westbound lanes. My back ached from the constant jarring as the plow hit uneven patches of road. My eyes burned from staring into the white void. But the snow was finally starting to let up a little. The forecast had been right about the timing at least. My phone rang again. Another unknown number. "Mr. Fitzgerald, this is Chief Anderson with the Canton Police Department. I wanted to personally thank you for clearing Route 44. We just got an ambulance through to the hospital with a cardiac patient. Without your work, we'd have had to wait for a helicopter, and in these conditions, that patient might not have made it. That made it all worthwhile. Just doing my job, Chief." "Well, your job saved a life today. Also, I heard about the incident with your HOA this morning. I want you to know that if you have any further issues with them interfering with emergency operations, you call me directly." He gave me his personal cell number. What that woman tried to do this morning was unconscionable. After I hung up, I felt a surge of energy despite my exhaustion. This was why I did this work. Not just for the money, though the state contract was excellent, but because when the weather turned dangerous, people needed someone willing to go out into it and make sure the roads were passable. I finished my route at 3:30 in the afternoon. having cleared over 20 miles of highway during one of the worst storms Connecticut had seen in years. The state's emergency coordinator called to thank me and let me know they were sending another contract for tomorrow since more snow was expected overnight. When I finally pulled back into my driveway, exhausted and hungry, I found a bright orange sticker plastered to my garage door. It was an HOA violation notice for parking a commercial vehicle in my driveway. She'd come back during the day while I was gone and put it there. I was too tired to even be angry. I peeled it off, took a photo of it with my phone, and went inside. Sarah had hot food waiting, and I practically fell into my chair at the kitchen table. Patricia came by around 2, Sarah said quietly. I watched through the window. She took pictures of your truck in the driveway and put that sticker on the garage. During the state of emergency, I said. After being explicitly warned by the governor's legal counsel. She's not thinking straight, Oliver. She's obsessed with the rules. I think you embarrassed her this morning, and now she's doubling down. Sarah was probably right, but I was too exhausted to deal with it right then. I ate, took a hot shower, and collapsed into bed at 6 in the evening. My phone woke me at 2 in the morning. Another call from the governor's office with another emergency contract. A second wave of snow was hitting earlier than expected, and they needed the same routes cleared. I dragged myself out of bed, drank an entire pot of coffee, and headed back out into the storm. My truck was exactly where I'd left it in my driveway. I half expected Patricia to be waiting with another tow truck, but apparently even she had limits. The second round of plowing was somehow harder than the first. My body was already sore, and the new snow had created drifts in places I just cleared. But I got it done, working through the freezing pre-dawn hours, pushing through the fatigue. When I got home at noon, there were 2 more orange stickers on my garage door, and a letter taped to my front door. The letter was from the HOA board. It informed me that I was being fined $1,000 for repeated violations, and that a lien would be placed on my property if I didn't pay within 30 days. It also stated that I was required to appear before the HOA board at a special meeting scheduled for Saturday evening to discuss ongoing violations and potential removal from the association. I called Jennifer Walsh at the governor's office. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I'm sorry you're dealing with this," she said after I explained the situation. "Unfortunately, HOA law is complicated. They do have the right to fine you and hold meetings. However, they cannot interfere with your state-designated emergency response work, and any fines or actions taken during the state of emergency declaration are likely legally questionable. So what do I do? Document everything. Take photos, save all communications. And I'd suggest getting a lawyer. The state can provide you with information for legal aid, but this is ultimately a civil matter between you and your HOA. Can they really remove my property from the association? Only under very specific circumstances, and even then, you'd have to agree to it. What they're probably trying to do is intimidate you into compliance. The question is whether you want to fight this or try to find a compromise." I thought about Patricia's face that first morning, the satisfaction in her eyes as she'd ordered my truck towed during a blizzard while I was trying to save lives. "I'm not backing down," I said. "Then get a lawyer, and I'll provide a statement about your work for the state if needed." I spent the afternoon researching HOA law in Connecticut and calling lawyers. Most were expensive, but I finally found one named Robert Chen, who specialized in HOA disputes and offered a reasonable flat rate for an initial consultation and representation at the board meeting. Robert came to my house that evening. He was in his mid-40s, sharp-eyed and carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen better days. "I've reviewed the documents you sent me," he said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. "The HOA is on shaky ground here. First, they took action during a declared state of emergency. Second, your work was specifically designated as essential emergency response by the state government. Third, the CCRs do prohibit commercial vehicles, but there's an exception clause for temporary situations, and this certainly qualifies. So they can't fine me. Oh, they can issue the fine. Whether it will hold up if challenged is another matter. More importantly, they absolutely cannot remove your property from the association without your consent. That's not how HOAs work in Connecticut. What they can do is make your life miserable with constant fines and violations until you either comply or fight back legally." "I want to fight back." Robert smiled. "Good, because I think we have a solid case, and frankly, what your HOA president did was outrageous. I'm going to send a letter to the board tomorrow outlining the legal issues with their position. I'll also attend the Saturday meeting with you, but I want you to prepare yourself. This could get ugly. HOA disputes have a way of becoming very personal." He wasn't kidding. The next few days were relatively quiet. The blizzard finally moved out, leaving Connecticut buried under 32 inches of snow. I did one more day of plowing for the state, clearing secondary routes and helping stranded motorists. The governor's office paid promptly, and I made more in 3 days than I usually did in a month. But the peace didn't last. On Friday morning, I found dog feces on my front porch. We didn't have a dog. Neither did any of our immediate neighbors. But Patricia walked her prissy little Pomeranian every morning, and I'd seen her pass by our house around 7. Sarah was livid. "She did this. I know she did." "We can't prove it," I said, cleaning up the mess with a garbage bag and a lot of paper towels. "This has gone beyond HOA rules, Oliver." "This is harassment." She was right. I called Robert Chen and told him about the incident. "Take photos of everything," he advised, "and consider installing a security camera. If this escalates, we'll need evidence." I spent Friday afternoon installing a Ring doorbell camera and 2 additional cameras covering my driveway and front porch. The best $200 I ever spent. Saturday evening arrived. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 in the community center, a small building at the entrance to our subdivision. Robert met me there at 6:45. "Remember," he said as we walked in, "stay calm. Don't lose your temper no matter what they say. Let me do most of the talking." The community center's meeting room was already packed. It looked like half the neighborhood had turned out. I recognized most of the faces. Some were friendly, like Mike Rodriguez and his wife Teresa, who gave me encouraging nods. Others were decidedly hostile. Susan Chen, no relation to my lawyer, was whispering to Deborah Whitmore, both of them shooting daggers at me with their eyes. Patricia sat at the head of the table on a raised platform, flanked by the other board members. Beside her was Linda Marshall, the vice president, a thin woman in her 60s who always looked like she smelled something unpleasant. To her left was Gary Thompson, the treasurer, a nervous-looking man who mostly just did whatever Patricia told him to do. Patricia called the meeting to order with a gavel, an actual wooden gavel. She took this stuff seriously. "We have a full agenda tonight, but first we'll address the ongoing situation with the property at 247 Oakwood Drive, owned by Oliver and Sarah Fitzgerald." She made it sound like I was a criminal. "Mr. Fitzgerald has repeatedly violated Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our CCRs by parking a commercial vehicle in his driveway. Despite multiple warnings, fines, and enforcement actions, he has refused to comply. The board has called this special meeting to discuss further action. Robert stood up. Excuse me, Miss Henderson. I'm Robert Chen, attorney for Mr. Fitzgerald. Before you proceed, I need to address several legal issues with the board's actions. Patricia's face went rigid. This is an HOA meeting, not a courtroom. Nevertheless, legal issues are involved. First, the primary enforcement action you attempted occurred during a declared state of emergency when Mr. Fitzgerald's vehicle was designated as essential emergency response equipment by the state government. Second, Connecticut law provides exceptions for temporary situations involving public safety. Third, your continued harassment of my client, including fines issued during the emergency declaration, may constitute tortious interference with his state contract. The room went silent. Patricia's face was turning red. We have every right to enforce our covenants, she said, her voice tight. Within the bounds of the law, yes. But you attempted to tow emergency response equipment during a blizzard, Miss Henderson, after being explicitly warned by the governor's legal counsel. That goes beyond HOA authority. The state of emergency is over, Patricia shot back, and the truck is still in his driveway right now, because he has another contract starting Monday morning. The National Weather Service is predicting another significant snow event, and the state has already issued Mr. Fitzgerald a contract to clear roads. His truck needs to be ready and accessible. Deborah Whitmore stood up. This is ridiculous. Rules are rules. Everyone else in this neighborhood has to follow them. Why should he get special treatment? Mike Rodriguez stood up on the other side of the room. Because he's saving lives, Deborah. While you were sitting at home complaining on Facebook, Oliver was out clearing the roads so ambulances could get through. That's not the point, Susan Chen jumped in. If we let one person break the rules, everyone will think they can. It's not breaking the rules, Robert interjected. It's a temporary situation covered by exception clauses in your own CCRs. Section 7, Paragraph 3, Subsection D specifically allows for temporary placement of vehicles during emergency situations. Patricia flipped through the binder in front of her, her face getting even redder. That section refers to emergency repairs, not parking. The language says emergency situations. It doesn't specify. And a series of blizzards with state contracts for snow removal certainly qualifies as an emergency situation. I watched this back and forth, feeling oddly detached. These people were seriously arguing about where I parked my truck while I was out literally saving lives. A woman I didn't know well, Elizabeth something, stood up in the back. I think we need some perspective here. My daughter works at Hartford Hospital. She told me that during the blizzard, they had a patient who would have died if the roads hadn't been cleared in time for the ambulance. That was on Route 44, Oliver's route, so maybe we should be thanking him instead of fining him. There were murmurs of agreement from several people. Patricia banged her gavel. This meeting is about HOA rules, not about Mr. Fitzgerald's employment. The issue is simple. He's parking a commercial vehicle in violation of our covenants. The board has voted to impose a fine of $1,000 and require immediate compliance. The board voted without Mr. Fitzgerald having an opportunity to present his case, Robert said. That's a violation of your own bylaws, which require notice and an opportunity to be heard before fines exceeding $500 are imposed. Patricia looked at Linda Marshall, who whispered something to her. Fine, Patricia said. Mr. Fitzgerald, you have 5 minutes to present your case. I stood up, my heart pounding. I wasn't good at public speaking, but I was angry enough that the words came easily. I've lived in this neighborhood for 8 years. I've followed the rules. I've paid my HOA dues on time. I've kept my lawn mowed and my house painted the approved colors. The only time my plow truck is in my driveway is during winter, and only when I'm actively working. The rest of the year it's in a storage lot 20 minutes away because I want to be a good neighbor. I looked around the room at the faces watching me. When the blizzard hit, the governor's office called me at 4:30 in the morning because they needed experienced contractors who could handle the conditions. I said yes, because people needed help. And when I tried to leave my own driveway to go do that work, Patricia tried to have my truck towed during a blizzard while I was on my way to clear emergency routes. Patricia started to interrupt, but Robert held up a hand. Let him finish. You gave him 5 minutes, I continued. The police chief called to thank me because I cleared the road in time for an ambulance to get a heart attack patient to the hospital. That person lived because the roads were clear, and I came home to find violation stickers on my garage and a $1,000 fine for doing my job, for helping people. My voice was getting louder, and I forced myself to stay calm. I'm not trying to break the rules. I'm not trying to devalue anyone's property or make the neighborhood look bad. I'm just trying to do my job and keep people safe. And I think it's pretty messed up that I'm being punished for that. I sat down. The room was completely quiet for a moment, then Mike Rodriguez started clapping. Others joined in. Not everyone, but enough. Patricia's face was purple now. Are you quite finished? Mr. Fitzgerald is finished, Robert said smoothly. Now I'd like to address the board's options going forward. You can continue to pursue fines and enforcement, which will result in a lawsuit that the HOA will likely lose while spending thousands in legal fees. Or you can recognize that Mr. Fitzgerald's situation is temporary and exceptional. Grant a seasonal exemption for his vehicle when he's actively working under state contract, and move on to actual issues that matter to this community. We don't negotiate with people who refuse to follow the rules, Patricia said coldly. Then you're opening the association to significant legal liability, Robert replied. I've prepared a lawsuit for tortious interference, harassment, and violations of Connecticut's emergency response statutes. I didn't file it because I hoped we could resolve this reasonably. But if the board insists on continuing this vendetta, I'll file on Monday morning. The word vendetta hit Patricia like a slap. How dare you? I am simply doing my job as HOA president. Your job is to manage the association for the benefit of all residents, not to pursue personal grudges. And based on the documentation I've reviewed, including social media posts, this has become personal. Linda Marshall leaned over and whispered urgently to Patricia. Gary Thompson looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Finally, Patricia spoke. The board will take this matter under advisement and vote at our next regular meeting in 2 weeks. That's not acceptable, Robert said. Mr. Fitzgerald needs to know his status immediately. He has another state contract starting Monday. Then he'll just have to risk the fine, Patricia snapped. Or, came a voice from the back of the room, the board president could stop being unreasonable and do what's right for once. Everyone turned. It was Harold Simmons, one of the oldest residents in the community. He'd been there since the subdivision was built in 1992. He almost never came to meetings. Harold, Patricia said, clearly not expecting this. We're simply enforcing the rules. You're being a bully, Patricia. And everyone in this room knows it. Harold walked slowly to the front, leaning on his cane. I was on the original board when we wrote these CCRs. The intent was never to prevent people from doing honest work. It was to keep people from running auto shops out of their garages or parking semi-trucks in their front yards. This young man has a pickup truck with a plow. He parks it in his driveway during snowstorms so he can help people. That's not a violation of the spirit of our rules. Patricia's mouth was working, but no sound came out. I move that we create an emergency exemption for vehicles actively engaged in state-contracted emergency response work, Harold continued. Do I have a second? Mike Rodriguez stood up. I second that motion. You can't just make motions from the floor, Patricia protested. Yes, we can, Harold said. It's in the bylaws. Any resident can make a motion at a community meeting. The board has to vote on it. Linda Marshall whispered to Patricia again, clearly confirming this was true. Fine, Patricia said through gritted teeth. All in favor of creating an exemption for emergency response vehicles. The room erupted with ayes. It wasn't even close. All opposed. Patricia, Linda, and Deborah raised their hands. Maybe 5 others scattered around the room. Motion passes, Harold said with satisfaction. Now stop wasting everyone's time with this nonsense and get back to actual HOA business. Patricia looked like she'd swallowed something poisonous, but she had no choice. The motion passes. Mr. Fitzgerald's vehicle is exempt when he's actively working under state contract. Meeting adjourned. She banged her gavel and stormed out of the room. I sat there in shock. It was over. Just like that, Robert was grinning. Well, that went better than expected. Harold came over and shook my hand. My grandson was in that ambulance, the cardiac patient. Elizabeth's daughter called me from the hospital. I wanted to come thank you in person, but then I heard about this meeting and figured I could do more good here. My throat went tight. Your grandson is okay, doing fine. Thanks to you getting those roads clear in time. He patted my shoulder. Don't let Patricia get to you. She's been angry at the world ever since her husband left her 5 years ago. Takes it out on everyone else. After the meeting, at least a dozen people came up to thank me or shake my hand. Mike Rodriguez invited me over for dinner the next week. Teresa hugged Sarah and said she'd been posting in the Facebook group defending us. But as we walked to our car, I saw Patricia standing by her BMW staring at us. Even from 30 feet away, I could see the rage on her face. This isn't over, Sarah whispered. She's not going to let this go. I squeezed her hand. Let her try. We won fair and square. I had no idea how right Sarah was, or how wrong I was. Sunday was quiet. I spent the day maintaining my truck and plow, checking hydraulic lines, and making sure everything was ready for Monday's contract. The state wanted me on the same routes since another winter storm was moving in from the Midwest. Monday morning, I got up at 4 again and headed out. The new storm was milder than the blizzard, just 6 to 8 inches expected, but it still needed to be cleared. I completed my route by early afternoon and came home feeling good. That's when I saw the police car in my driveway. My heart sank. Sarah was standing on the porch talking to a Canton police officer. Not Chief Anderson, but someone I didn't recognize. A younger guy, maybe 30, looking serious. Oliver Fitzgerald, the officer asked as I got out of my truck. That's me. What's going on? I'm Officer Kevin Morrison. We received a complaint that you've been operating a commercial vehicle without proper licensing and insurance. The complainant also alleged that you've been using your vehicle to damage neighborhood property. What? That's insane. Who made this complaint? But I already knew. I'm not at liberty to say, but I need to see your commercial driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. I pulled out my wallet and provided everything. My CDL was current, my registration was up to date, and I had full commercial insurance through a provider that specialized in plow contractors. Officer Morrison examined everything carefully, then called something in on his radio. Everything checks out, he said after a few minutes, but I do need to ask about the property damage allegation. What property damage? The complaint states that your plow truck has been scraping against the curbs and damaging the neighborhood's landscaping. I almost laughed. "Officer, I haven't plowed a single street in this neighborhood. I've been working on state highways, Route 44 and Route 202. You can verify that with the state's Emergency Operations Center." Officer Morrison wrote something in his notepad. "I'll follow up on that. One more thing. The complainant also said you've been threatening HOA board members." That made my blood boil. "That's a lie. Complete lie. I haven't threatened anyone. In fact, I have an attorney specifically because the HOA president tried to have my truck towed during the blizzard while I was working on emergency response." The officer's eyebrows went up. "Is that right?" "Yes, sir. You can call Chief Anderson. He's aware of the whole situation." He gave me his personal cell number in case there were any more issues. Officer Morrison stepped away and made a phone call. I could hear him talking but couldn't make out the words. After a few minutes, he came back. "Chief Anderson says you're doing good work and that we should disregard any harassment complaints from your HOA. But he also said I should document this visit in case there are future issues." "Madam," he turned to Sarah, "have you or your husband received any direct threats from HOA members?" Sarah hesitated. "Not threats exactly, but someone put dog feces on our porch Friday morning. We think it was the HOA president because she walks her dog past here every morning, but we didn't see it happen." "You have security cameras." "We just installed them Friday afternoon." After the incident, Officer Morrison handed me his card. "If anything else happens, call us immediately and save any threatening messages or emails. Based on what Chief Anderson told me, it sounds like your HOA president is retaliating against you for embarrassing her. That can escalate quickly." After he left, Sarah and I went inside and just sat at the kitchen table, both of us shaken. "She filed a false police report," Sarah said. "That's illegal, isn't it?" "It is. But she'll probably say she had concerns and was just asking the police to investigate. Hard to prove it was malicious." "Oliver, I'm scared. She's unhinged." I couldn't argue with that. Patricia had gone from being an annoying HOA president to someone who was actively trying to cause us serious problems. Filing false reports with the police, making up allegations. This was beyond normal HOA petness. "I'm calling Robert," I said. Robert Chen was not happy when I told him what happened. "That crosses a line. Making false allegations to the police is serious. Did the officer write a report?" "Yes, he said he was documenting everything." "Get a copy of that report." I'm going to send Patricia Henderson a cease and desist letter tomorrow. This has gone from an HOA dispute to harassment and potentially defamation if she's spreading false allegations about you. Tuesday morning, I woke up to find all 4 of my truck's tires slashed. Not just flat, slashed. Deep cuts from a knife. I called the police immediately. Officer Morrison came out again, this time with a detective. They took photos, measurements, examined the cuts. My new security cameras had caught something, but not much. Around 3 in the morning, a figure in dark clothes and a ski mask had approached my truck and spent about 2 minutes by each tire. The footage was too dark and grainy to identify anyone, but the person's build and height looked consistent with a woman. A woman about Patricia's size. "The problem is we can't prove who it was," Detective Sarah Williams explained. "The cameras show someone, but we can't see their face or any identifying features." "It's the HOA president," I said. "This is retaliation." "We strongly suspect that," Detective Williams said. "But suspecting and proving are different things. Has she made any direct threats?" "No, she's too smart for that. But this started the moment I stood up to her at the HOA meeting." "I believe you, but without proof we can't arrest her. What I can do is go talk to her." Sometimes just having the police show up and ask questions is enough to make people back off. The tires cost me $800 to replace. Commercial truck tires aren't cheap, especially when you need 4 of them immediately. I had another state contract that afternoon, and I couldn't work without tires. Robert Chen filed a restraining order request that same day. We had the slashed tires, the false police report, the dog feces incident, and the ongoing harassment through HOA violations. It wasn't a slam-dunk case, but Robert thought we had enough. The hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. Wednesday, I worked my state contract without incident. Thursday was quiet, too quiet. I kept waiting for the next thing to happen. Friday morning, Sarah and I went to court with Robert Chen. Patricia showed up with her own lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit who introduced himself as James Bradley. The judge was a middle-aged woman named Judge Rebecca Morrison, no relation to Officer Morrison. She reviewed the paperwork, then looked at both sides. "Mr. Chen, you're asking for a restraining order against Miss Henderson based on allegations of harassment. Miss Henderson, you're contesting this. Let's start with Mr. Fitzgerald. Tell me what's been happening." I explained everything. The attempted towing during the blizzard, the HOA violations during the state of emergency, the false police report, the dog feces, the slashed tires. Robert entered photos and police reports as evidence. When I finished, Judge Morrison turned to Patricia. "Miss Henderson, would you like to respond?" Patricia's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client has been serving as HOA president for 7 years. She has a responsibility to enforce the community's covenants and restrictions. Mr. Fitzgerald has repeatedly violated these rules by parking a commercial vehicle in his driveway. While we acknowledge his work for the state is admirable, it doesn't exempt him from HOA regulations." "What about the attempted towing during the blizzard?" the judge asked. "During a declared state of emergency." My client was unaware of the emergency declaration at that time and was simply following standard enforcement procedures. Robert stood up. "Your Honor, that's false. My client's conversation with the governor's legal counsel occurred while Miss Henderson was present. She was explicitly told that interfering with emergency operations was illegal. She knew." Judge Morrison looked at Patricia. "Is that true? Were you present during a phone conversation with the governor's office?" Patricia's face was red. "I may have heard some of the conversation, but I didn't understand the full implications. And the false police report, the allegations of property damage and threats that turned out to be completely unfounded. I had genuine concerns about Miss Henderson." The judge cut her off. "I've been a judge for 15 years. I know what genuine concerns look like, and I know what vindictive retaliation looks like. Mr. Fitzgerald provides evidence of an escalating pattern of harassment following an HOA meeting where you were publicly overruled. The slashed tires are particularly concerning." "There's no proof my client had anything to do with that," Bradley said quickly. "No definitive proof," the judge agreed. "But a reasonable person would see the pattern. Miss Henderson, I'm granting a temporary restraining order. You are to stay at least 100 feet away from Mr. and Mrs. Fitzgerald and their property. No contact, direct or indirect. This includes no HOA enforcement actions specifically targeting them. The HOA as an organization can continue to function, but you personally are not to have any involvement with the Fitzgeralds." Patricia looked like she'd been struck. "But I'm the HOA president. How am I supposed to avoid involvement with a resident? You'll figure it out. Delegate to your vice president, or step down. But if you violate this order, you'll face criminal charges. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia said quietly. "We'll have a follow-up hearing in 30 days to determine if a permanent order is warranted. In the meantime, Mr. Fitzgerald, I suggest you keep your cameras running and document any further incidents." We left the courthouse feeling like we'd won, but I still felt uneasy. Patricia had been humiliated twice now, in front of her community and then in front of a judge. People like her didn't just give up. The weekend passed without incident. I worked my state contracts, cleared the roads, came home. No violation stickers, no slashed tires, no police visits. Maybe the restraining order had actually worked. Monday morning, I got a call from the state's Emergency Operations Center. "Mr. Fitzgerald, this is Tom Bradford, Director of Emergency Operations. We need to talk about your contracts." My stomach dropped. "Is there a problem?" "We received a complaint that you've been falsifying your work hours and not completing your assigned routes. The complaint came from a Patricia Henderson who claims to be a concerned citizen." I closed my eyes. "Of course, Mr. Bradford, that's completely false. Patricia Henderson is my HOA president. She's under a restraining order for harassing me. This is retaliation." There was a pause. "Are you telling me this is related to a personal dispute?" "Yes, sir. She tried to have my truck towed during the blizzard while I was on my way to start work. She's been harassing me ever since. I can provide you with court documents, police reports, everything." Another pause. "Send me everything. Because if what you're telling me is true, Miss Henderson just committed a serious offense. Filing false complaints with a state agency is a felony." "I'll send it right now." I hung up and immediately emailed Tom Bradford every document Robert Chen had compiled. The restraining order, the police reports, the timeline of harassment. Everything. An hour later, Tom Bradford called back. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I've reviewed your documentation and confirmed your work with our GPS tracking system. Your routes have been completed exactly as contracted. Miss Henderson's complaint is entirely false. What happens now?" I'm forwarding this to the state attorney's office. Filing false complaints with state agencies is taken very seriously, especially when it involves emergency operations. They'll decide whether to press charges. That afternoon, 2 state police officers showed up at Patricia Henderson's house. I know because half the neighborhood was watching and texting about it. They arrested her for filing a false report with a state agency and for violating the restraining order by indirectly contacting me through the state office. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Some people were shocked. Others were saying it was about time. A few were defending Patricia and claiming I'd somehow set her up. Detective Sarah Williams called me that evening. "Mr. Fitzgerald, we also got evidence from Patricia Henderson's phone records. We applied for a warrant after the state charges were filed, and we found some interesting things." "Like what?" "Text messages to Deborah Whitmore discussing ways to make your life hell after the HOA meeting. Planning the slashed tires. She didn't do it herself. She paid someone $500 to do it while wearing a ski mask so it wouldn't trace back to her. Can you prove that?" The text messages are pretty clear. "And we picked up the person she hired, a handyman named Carl Jenks who does odd jobs around the neighborhood. He confessed. Said Patricia promised him the $500+ future work if he'd slash your tires and make it look like random vandalism." I sat down heavily. So she really did it. She really did. And now she's facing charges for filing false reports, violating a restraining order, criminal mischief through the tire slashing, and conspiracy. She's looking at real jail time, Mr. Fitzgerald. Part of me felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. All of this over parking my truck in my driveway. The next week was a media circus. The local news picked up the story because it had everything people love: an out-of-control HOA, a blizzard, a hero contractor, and a villain who got arrested. I did one interview with Channel 8 News. mostly because they promised to focus on the importance of not interfering with emergency operations. The reporter, a sharp woman named Lisa Chang, really drove home the angle about Patricia trying to tow emergency equipment during a blizzard. The story went viral locally, then got picked up by national news websites. Suddenly, everyone had opinions about HOAs and overreach and people who care more about rules than common sense. Patricia's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the state attorney wasn't budging. They wanted to make an example of her because interfering with emergency operations had endangered lives. The trial happened in March, 3 months after the blizzard. I had to testify, describing that first morning when Patricia tried to have my truck towed while I was on my way to save lives. The jury looked horrified. Carl Jenks testified about being hired to slash my tires. Deborah Whitmore tried to plead the fifth but ended up testifying under immunity, describing Patricia's obsession with making an example of me. The most damaging testimony came from a state transportation official who explained that my delay in starting work that first morning, the 45 minutes lost due to Patricia's interference, had directly impacted response times. While no one could prove someone had died because of the delay, it had been close. Minutes had mattered. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all charges. Patricia Henderson was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with 1 year suspended pending good behavior. She was also ordered to pay restitution for my slashed tires, legal fees, and a $10,000 fine to the state. The HOA board quietly accepted her resignation. Linda Marshall took over as president and immediately announced a policy review to ensure nothing like this could happen again. One of her first acts was to officially exempt emergency response vehicles from commercial vehicle restrictions. Life went back to normal, or as normal as it could be. I kept working my regular plowing contracts, and when the next winter came, the state hired me again for emergency work. My truck sat in my driveway whenever I needed it there, and nobody said a word. Sarah and I stayed in touch with Harold Simmons, whose grandson made a full recovery. Mike Rodriguez became a good friend. We had barbecues in the summer and watched football together in the fall. The neighborhood Facebook group eventually moved on to other dramas, though occasionally someone would reference the incident when discussions about HOA rules came up. It became a cautionary tale about taking things too far. I saw Patricia Henderson once more, about a year after her sentencing. She'd served 8 months and been released for good behavior. I was at the grocery store, reaching for a carton of milk, and there she was at the other end of the dairy aisle. Our eyes met. She looked older, smaller somehow. The arrogance was gone from her face, replaced by something that might have been shame or just exhaustion. She turned and walked away without a word. I grabbed my milk and headed to the checkout, and that was that. The chapter was finally closed. Looking back, the whole thing seemed surreal. A dispute over where I parked my truck escalated into criminal charges, a trial, and a prison sentence. But that's what happens when someone cares more about enforcing rules than treating people with basic decency and common sense. The blizzard taught me a lot. It taught me that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. It taught me that most people are reasonable and kind when given the chance. And it taught me that standing up to bullies is worth it, even when it's scary and expensive and exhausting. I still plow snow. Still take state contracts when they come. Still park my truck in my driveway when I need it there. And every time I do, I think about that morning when Patricia tried to tow it, and I think about the ambulance that made it through because I was able to get on the road and do my job. The governor's office sent me a commendation letter that spring, thanking me for my service during the blizzard. It's framed on my office wall, right next to my plow contractor's license, and a photo of my truck covered in snow after a long shift. Sarah jokes that I should write a book about the whole experience. Maybe someday I will. For now, I'm content to tell the story when people ask, usually over a beer, usually with a sense of disbelief that it actually happened. The new HOA president, Linda Marshall, turned out to be reasonable and fair. She focused on actual problems like maintaining the common areas and organizing neighborhood events, not harassing residents over petty violations. The subdivision became a friendlier place without Patricia's constant enforcement actions. A few months after Patricia's release from prison, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved away, sold her house, and left Connecticut entirely. Nobody seemed to know where she went, and nobody seemed to care much. She'd burned too many bridges, alienated too many people. Deborah Whitmore and Susan Chen kept their heads down and stopped stirring up trouble. Without Patricia's leadership, they lost their enthusiasm for HOA enforcement. They still attended meetings, but mostly they just voted yes on routine matters and went home. The community center where that dramatic meeting had taken place got renovated last year. They put in new carpet and painted the walls. But I still remember exactly how it looked that night when Harold Simmons stood up and called for a vote that changed everything. Sometimes I drive past the sections of Route 44 that I cleared during the blizzard. They look like any other stretch of highway now, cars passing by with no idea of the drama that unfolded there. But I know. I remember pushing through the whiteout conditions, my plow throwing walls of snow aside, making a path for emergency vehicles that would save lives. That's what made Patricia's actions so incomprehensible. She was so fixated on her rules and her authority that she couldn't see the bigger picture. Couldn't understand that sometimes rules need to bend for reality. Couldn't grasp that keeping people safe matters more than keeping driveways clear of work trucks. The irony is that if she'd just been reasonable from the start, none of it would have happened. If she'd said, "Oliver, I understand you need your truck accessible during winter emergencies. Let's work out a compromise," I would have happily agreed to park it in the garage or at least behind the house when I wasn't actively working. I'm not an unreasonable person, but she chose confrontation over conversation, enforcement over understanding, and it cost her everything. Her position, her reputation, her freedom for 8 months, and ultimately her home and community. I don't take any satisfaction in her downfall. I'm not that kind of person, but I do believe in accountability. She broke the law, endangered lives, and harassed my family. She deserved to face consequences for those actions. The legal bills from the whole ordeal were substantial, even with Robert Chen's reasonable rates. But the state contracts paid well, and we came out ahead financially. More importantly, we won the principle of the thing. We stood up to a bully and won. Robert Chen and I stayed in touch. He referred me to other contractors who'd had similar HOA disputes, and I was able to share my experience and advice. Turns out HOA overreach is a common problem, especially when it comes to work vehicles. Several states have since passed laws specifically protecting essential service vehicles from HOA restrictions. Connecticut was one of them, partly because of the publicity from my case. The law is called the Emergency Services Vehicle Protection Act, and it specifically exempts vehicles used for emergency response, snow removal, utility work, and other essential services from HOA commercial vehicle bans when the vehicles are actively being used for those purposes. It passed unanimously in both the State House and Senate. The governor signed it in a ceremony where I was invited to attend. I shook her hand and thanked her for her office's support during the blizzard. She told me I'd done good work, and that Patricia Henderson's interference had been outrageous. It was gratifying to hear that from the state's highest elected official. Life went on. Seasons changed. Winters came and went, bringing snow that needed to be cleared and ice that needed to be treated. I worked my regular clients and occasionally took state contracts when they needed extra help. My truck, the one that started all this trouble, eventually got too old and needed to be replaced. I bought a newer F450 with a bigger plow and more reliable hydraulics. It sits in my driveway during winter storms, ready to go at a moment's notice. Nobody complains. Nobody puts violation stickers on my garage. Nobody tries to tow it. That's how it should have been from the beginning. Sarah and I are still in the same house in Meadowbrook Estates. We thought about moving after everything that happened, but we decided we liked the neighborhood and our actual neighbors too much to let Patricia's actions drive us away. This is our home. We earned the right to stay here. Our kids, Emma and Jack, grew up hearing the story of the blizzard and the HOA president who went to jail. They tell it to their friends sometimes, usually with embellishments. In Emma's version, I'm practically a superhero who saved thousands of lives. In Jack's version, Patricia Henderson is basically a cartoon villain. The truth is somewhere in between, but I let them have their stories. The security cameras we installed during the conflict are still up and running. We've caught a couple of package thieves and helped the police solve a string of car break-ins. They've more than paid for themselves. I sometimes wonder what Patricia thinks about now, whether she regrets how things went down, whether she ever realized that her obsession with rules and control destroyed her life. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. I think about the cardiac patient who lived because the roads were clear. I think about Harold Simmons thanking me for saving his grandson. I think about the police chief calling to tell me I'd made a difference. That's what matters. Not HOA politics or property values or whether commercial vehicles are aesthetically pleasing. Lives matter. People matter. Common sense and decency matter. It's a lesson Patricia Henderson learned the hard way. I hope she actually learned it. I hope wherever she is now, she's become a better person. I hold no grudge. Life's too short for that. But I also haven't forgotten. The experience changed me. Made me more aware of the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Made me more conscious of how quickly situations can escalate when reasonable people fail to find common ground. These days, when I see news stories about HOA disputes, I shake my head. So many of them could be resolved with simple conversation and compromise. But too often, people dig in, make it personal, and turn minor disagreements into major conflicts. Don't be like Patricia Henderson. Be reasonable. Be kind. Remember that rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. And for heaven's sake, don't try to tow emergency equipment during a blizzard. It's common sense. But apparently, common sense isn't as common as it should be. I still plow snow every winter. Still feel that satisfaction when I clear a road, and know I'm helping people get where they need to go safely. Still get calls from the state when big storms hit, and they need experienced contractors. And every time my phone rings at 4 in the morning with an emergency contract, I look at my truck sitting in my driveway, ready to go. And I'm grateful that I can just climb in and start working without worrying about tow trucks or HOA presidents or violation stickers. That's freedom. That's justice. That's how it should be. The blizzard happened years ago now, but the lessons remain. Stand up for what's right. Don't let bullies win. Support your neighbors. Value people over rules. Use common sense. Be kind. Simple principles, really, but they made all the difference. I'm Oliver Fitzgerald, And that's my story about the time my HOA tried to tow my plow truck during a blizzard and ended up in prison for it. It's a true story, every word of it, as crazy as that sounds. And somewhere in Connecticut, roads are clear and safe because when it mattered most, I was able to do my job. That's what I'm proud of. Not the drama, not the media attention, not even the legal victory. Just the work itself. The purpose behind it all, that's what makes it worthwhile. That's what makes everything else just noise. And when the next blizzard comes, I'll be ready. My truck will be in my driveway, my plow will be attached, and when the governor's office calls, I'll answer. Because that's what I do. I clear roads, I help people. And no HOA president, no matter how determined, is going to stop me from doing that ever again.